And today, as part of our sales hacks training, we're going to be focusing on Atlas selling. You're probably joining the call because you haven't worked with Atlas selling before. It's a fairly common sales technique, but it actually is a very effective tool for lowering acquisition costs. So a lot of this strategy comes from a formula that has been proven to be one of the most effective ways of making it easier to acquire new customers. And the foundation to this formula or strategy is all about commonality. In order to reduce customer acquisition costs, we have to increase the commonality factors, or the depth of common factors that we have with the prospects that we're working with or pursuing. In order to reduce those in order to increase our commonality factors, we have to reduce the group size or the prospecting list that we're working on. And so essentially by decreasing the prospecting group, we can then increase commonality and ultimately lower acquisition costs. So there's a few examples of how we can increase commonality. We can look at common interests, common job histories, religious backgrounds, schooling, common friends, locality. A lot of this is something that I think all of us would agree is something that's intuitive for any sales individual. Today we're going to be focusing on locality, which is why the strategy itself is called Atlas selling. So let me explain a little bit about how this works. So if we were to look at reducing, so if we go back one slide, in order to reduce group size and ultimately increase commonality, we need to look at a geographical area that's fairly small, but not small enough that there's not enough prospects to work with and actually focus on. And so in order to make Atlas selling effective, what we want to do is we want to look at a 1,000-foot radius around where we live. Sometimes this will be different depending on where you live and the natural geography of homes and density. But essentially what we're looking for is roughly 100 to 200 prospects to put on a list. And so if we were to pull up a map of our local area and look at the different homes and streets, and you would know your density better than we would, but essentially 1,000 feet is what most sales reps will be looking at. So in the map, you'll see a lot of homes, a lot of streets, but this information in and of itself really doesn't help us much. So what we need to do is we need to be able to translate this information into something that we can actually work with. So here at Ensable, we've put together a free public tool. You could use it as much as you want, but it's ensable.com/local, all lowercase. So when you go to ensable.com/local, you'll be able to access an archive. So let me walk you through the process of how to actually pull the data out of the system and get the information that you're looking for. When you arrive at the page, you'll see a search tool at the top. At the search tool, what you'll want to do is put in the street name and your zip code. You could also play around with different factors, because sometimes there's different ways to spell your street, or sometimes there's different ways of actually describing your street. And so you can try different search tools. You can also use your city rather than your zip code, or maybe your state. But what we're trying to do is differentiate individual records from all the other street names and areas across the country. So if you give it enough information to find all the data that you're looking for, you should start to see some results come through. The results are going to come from the best resources of databases that store personal information on individuals. So in some of the areas, you'll see the individual's names directly in the title. In other sites, you'll have to go into the website to actually find the information. And so you'll have to kind of play with it to see what you're looking for. But ultimately, what we're looking for is actual contacts. Sometimes you may want to go in and just make sure that you're looking at the contacts that are the right fit, because there may be some false positives if there's other areas of similar names and it's brought those information points in. So again, we're looking for about 100 to 200 contacts here. When you get the names, you put them probably in a spreadsheet. Take the names and go to LinkedIn. In LinkedIn, in the top left-hand corner, you'll go ahead and click on the search box. But before searching in the search box, go ahead and click on People. which shows up after you click on that box. After you click on people in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a button that says All Filters. We need to narrow down our results to make sure that we're finding the right contacts and also to save us time in the whole search process. In the location section of the All Filters page, you'll see that you'll be able to enter in a city or a geographical area that your city is grouped into. Oftentimes, the city that you live in will not necessarily be the official geographic area for where you live, and so you may have to add one or two different regions from LinkedIn where you actually are grouped into. And so in our case, I live in Eagle Mountain, but my area is actually Provo, Utah. So you probably kind of understand which metropolitan area your local area pertains to on LinkedIn. From there, we'll take the name and put it into the name fields at the very bottom of the page. Now you should start to see the results to come through. In this case, there's one result, which is why we wanted to go through this process of narrowing down the results based off of geography. In the case that you didn't find anybody, that chances are they may not have a LinkedIn profile. They may not be in the right industry. But if they don't show up, there's probably not a lot of success in actually pursuing those opportunities. I want to make sure that this is at least a business professional that you can engage with and work with. And so if you don't find those individuals, you can do that. You may also want to double check to make sure that they're still in the area. Some of the directories and resources that are available through these public records are not always kept up to date. And so you can double check on LinkedIn whether or not they're still in that area. Now, some of you may be wondering, well, what if these individuals are not the right decision maker? And that's one of the reasons why we had everyone review, prior to today's call, the training we did on inside versus outside referrals. If you remember the training or if you did your homework, essentially what this is was an experiment that we ran where we looked at the level of success compared to indirect versus direct referrals. Indirect referrals is what we call individuals within an organization that aren't the decision maker but are easy targets to find your way into the door, where direct referrals is where you're going directly for the decision maker and bypassing any indirect routes. What we found was that indirect routes were more effective because what happens is they were more willing to respond because they were easy targets. Individuals who weren't necessarily felt like you were trying to sell them something, you were just asking for information. So a lot of times if you talk to customer support, they'll answer your calls. And if you talk to them about reaching the right individual who can help you with certain information points and decision making, if they do refer you to that individual, it creates a social obligation for that individual to respond. Because they may not have that social obligation to you, but if they ignore the email or the introduction from someone inside of their company, then that would make them look bad. And so again, inside versus outside referrals, this discussion is focused on helping us understand why we would reach out to individuals who may not necessarily be the right decision maker, but they can ultimately get us into the right door. So if you're an Enable member, I would highly recommend that you take the companies that these individuals work for, add them to your tracking list, and make sure that you add a note into the label section, helping you remember that this is someone that lives local to your area. So the next time a sales opportunity comes up for these individuals, you can leverage this geographical relationship and reach out to your contacts and say, hey, I noticed your company is moving. Is this something that I can help your company out with? And hopefully they introduce you to the right individual because you've layered on your social obligation, since that commonality factor helps encourage them to actually respond, engage, and recommend you. And so that's one of the reasons why this lowers our acquisition costs, is because it builds in that social obligation because of the commonality factor. And so this is how that formula is really designed to help us make sales much easier. And so again, if we can reduce the group size by focusing on a smaller geographical area, we can then increase commonality and lower acquisition costs. So that's everything for today. Again, a short call, but I appreciate everyone joining us today. If anybody has any questions, I'll stick around. Otherwise, hope everyone has a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you on the next call. All right, so Jeremy had a question about high density population areas like New York. What he was asking is whether or not he should use the same type of formula for high density markets. So what we mentioned in the beginning was that we may have to adjust that radius based off of the density. It's not necessarily the radius that we're looking for with the 1,000 feet radius. What we're looking for is the group size. So we want to keep it under 200 contacts. So if you live in a large apartment building, you would likely just want to focus on that specific apartment building or on the buildings next door. So hopefully that answers your question, Jeremy. Okay, great. Any other questions before we wrap it up? All right, we're going to go ahead and shut this down. Again, thanks everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on the next call. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.